I'm Chuck Belanger, Market Development Agronomist for Southwestern Ontario, so I cover from Owen Sound down to Windsor to Niagara, supporting our dealer network, our territory managers and customers with any kind of agronomy questions they may have or problems they may have. So today I'm going to talk to you on three different topics. They're all on soybeans. We're going to talk early planted soybeans first, and then we're going to go into forage soybeans for a few minutes, and then we're going to go into some foliar feeding at the end. So how many people here plant their soybeans before corn? Nobody in this group. Good. Okay, well that's all right. So a couple years ago, maybe a little longer than that, Horst Bonner did a bunch of research on this, and he did it again last year, and found out that soybeans are pretty resilient in comparison to corn. So the idea is maybe if you've got large acreage or you want to get started early, it's better to put your soybeans in ahead of your corn since, like I said, soybeans are a little bit more resilient. Now, that is true if you're on a clay loam, sand loam, but it is not true if you're on heavy clay. I don't see anybody here from Essex, no, or Lambton, Alderman, anybody? I don't think anybody in those three counties would like to put their soybeans in when the ground is still cold and there's chances of rain. Because I don't care how good of a soybean variety you have, it's not going to push through a 2-inch or a 3-inch crust that we see in some of those heavy clays. So I do a lot of dealings down in Essex, I do a lot of dealings in Lambton and in Haldeman, and I just don't recommend it. So how early is early? So Dennis, you're from Chatham, Kent. How early is early?
For soybeans?
Yeah.
Early is, I would say at least end of April, first week of May.
Okay, that's early. Where are you from, Bob?
Simcoe.
Simcoe? What's early for you? Okay. What's early for you?
5th of May if you're ready to go.
Okay, right on. So I've got a cooperator, customer 3 roads down, or more than that, closer to Embro, that planted on March 24th. So everybody knows what March was like. We had that nice 2 weeks. Guys were working around all around us. And this customer just decided, which was great, he had a 10-acre field. I'm going to play out to see what I can do. And he put a variety in, which is about a 1.5 maturity, 1.6 maturity group, and put the beans in, and lo and behold, within a week we started to see some emergence. What happened after that week? We had snow, we had frost, we had everything happening, right? So he planted at 140,000, which is what he wanted to finish up with. So when everything was all said and done, on the 20th of May, when I went there to the population count, I had an average of 98,000 plants. Okay, so 98,000 plants. Last week we were there and did yield tour. What do you think that field come in as a yield on the yield tour? Take a guess.
66.
A little high. A little high. Close. Not bad. 58.9 bushel, which just floored me. I thought we would see 30 bushel, 40 bushel. Now we only did, of course, yield tour. You guys all know it. Just run into the field, do a quick check and move on to another field so we get a good replication of the province. So we'll see what the combine says at the end of this. Now he had some weed control issues. He had to spray a few more extra times, but overall it ended up turning out really well. So what could he have done a little bit differently than what he did do? One thing is he planted the maturity group that he would plant here, right? I would push that maturity group up a little bit, right? So take a 1.9, maybe go to a 2.3 or 2.4 and plant that. I would up the population as well, right? Because of like the frost and everything else that happened. So he could finish up with 140,000. But he was lucky in a way that the variety that he grew was a 30-inch rows that pushed out pretty good and it filled in. So what we did here, so early here was April 14th. It was cold. Greg came here and planted 2 varieties. So the 2 varieties that we used were Superior R2X, which is a 2.7 maturity group, which is grown down in Essex and Chatham, Kent, and into Lambton. And we put it up against Cyclone, which is more a 1.5 maturity group, which kind of falls into this area, right? So there's one thing that we did a little bit wrong here. The Superiors are a great variety. They're excellent for heavy clay. They will out-yield anything out there in heavy clay, or at least they'll run with everything on heavy clay. But you put them in loam, they get growthy, and you get elongation of the potting, and then we end up with, less pods. And that's kind of what we saw here. So I'm going to move here for a second. So April 14th, there is no story. Everything kind of laid out the way that course did last couple of years. So pod count on Superior was 36 pods, and there was 66% of those pods were 3 bean pods. And on the Cyclone, there was 59 pods, and 72% or 73% were 3 bean pods. A week later, we ended up with almost the same pod count, 33 and 56, and about the same amount of 3 bean pods in each. What was interesting is when we went into what I would call more of an average planting day here, all the beans that Greg planted here were planted on May the 10th, with the exception of this trial. On May the 14th, we ended up with 53 pods on the Superior, so almost 20 pods more, and 56 on the Cyclone, which is basically the same as what you would get in the early plantings. What was interesting though was on the longer day bean, there were more 4 bean pods. There was hardly any 4 bean pods at all on the Cyclones, and the Superiors on the 2 early plantings and this planting, there was at least 4 to 5 of those pods were 4 bean pods. As you go later, the pod count drops a little bit, so we're down to 32 and 56, and I think the last one was 37 and 59 is what it was. So, you know, like I think what Horst showed us was that we're not going to gain a bunch of yield by planting early. It's going to get us in the field earlier, right? It's going to get us doing some work. We've been talking for years about getting corn to come out of the ground within how many hours? Anybody know? What's that?
6
6 days or 6
hours old.
Okay, I'd love to see that happen. but like we say, you know, like if you can get everything to emerge within 72 hours, you're gonna have a good corn crop, right? You put corn in early when it's cold soils, you're not gonna achieve that. So by going early with the beans, putting the corn in a little bit later, like I've seen phenomenal yields with corn planted mid-May right into June. Some of our best corn last year was planted on June the 8th down our way. Some of the highest yields. I'm not saying that happens every year. Soybeans are more resilient. They can come up, scatter, and you're still going to have a great yield. Right? So my findings to date, nothing really jumped out to me. Other than I think we're going to see probably the same yield on May 14th as we did on the April 14th, or pretty close to it. Maybe a little bit lower at April 14th. Horst's data showed about a 2.6 bushel difference when he went from April 22nd to May 22nd last year. There was a 2.2 bushel difference and lower. Okay, so the early planting was 2.2 bushel lower than what the normal planting would be on May 22nd. Now, by using a longer day variety, he has shown anywhere from a 6.4 to a 7 bushel advantage.
What's the reason for a lot of 2 bean pods? Or what do you think? I have my theory.
I haven't seen a lot of 2 bean pods, Pierre, to be honest with you. Like in the lower canopy, I'm seeing it a lot. I'm seeing a lot more 3s and very little 4s. Like in the yield tour type thing when I was out doing yield tour. Like here, like I got the numbers here for each one of these things. So, you know, 2 beans, we had 8, 10, you know, so probably about 10% of the plant, roughly, is a 2 bean pod. And I guess it goes by area. A lot of it has to do with the climate, I think. A lot of it had to do with the rain and the heat. I think a lot of pods, if you look at some of those 2 bean pods, they were potentially 3, but one bean just aborted, right? And I think a lot of it had to do with the excess heat. We've gained a lot of like long, not just heat units, but like a lot of days together with a lot of heat. So like it wasn't like 2 or 3 days at 30 and then go back down into the 20s. It was like a whole week of 30 to 40, right? And I think that's where we aborted a lot. We'll talk a little bit about that when we get into the foliar at the end there of what we can do to kind of help that through. So, yep.
So, in the different varieties, what triggered the difference between the number of pods and the number of beans per pod?
I think it's the growth. The growth here, like just how the growth took off, and like there was more room for that 4 bean pod to produce itself. And if you look at these, we'll come back later because I know we'll have time at the end. You can pull up these plants and look at them. I just asked you to put them back same spot, but you'll see where there is 4 bean pods. They're right in the middle. right in the middle of the plant. And so, like, you know, like that would be partway through maturity, right when things are maturing. So, and if you look at the elongation, if you look at where the pod placement is on the, say, the earlier maturity versus the long date, with that extra growth, we've got more of a gap between the pods itself, right? So normally, like I was really surprised to only see 30 to 40 beans or pods on a plant on Superior. We don't see that down south, right? So it is out of its area here as well, right? So, okay, so we'll move on down to forage soybeans. Who grows forage soybeans? You're gonna find this interesting. I'm going to talk forage beans for like 5 minutes. I hate to ask you to step up again and move, but I don't want to talk too long on this. So our territory manager out in Eastern Ontario, Lee Hudson, looked into forage soybeans about 3 or 4 years ago. She read some stuff in the States, coming out of the States. So what we were using was one of our longest day soybean variety, which was Dynamite at the time, and she was growing it up there. And she come to find out that, you know, if you get a good growth, a nice strong plant, you could get about 10 metric ton of forage at 65% moisture. So it's very important that with forage soybeans that you cut them at about I'd say R4. So just before beans start to drop the leaves, you want as much greenage on there. So what we did is we went down south and we found ourselves a nice variety. We call it Mammoth, and it's a 5.0 maturity group. Got a guy in Essex County actually that's growing these down in Harrow. He wants to see if he can take it to yield. I said, you realize it's 2 times your maturity group? But he was going to give it a try anyways. And for those that grow beans after peas, know that you know, like beans after peas, whether it's in June or first week of July, you plant the longest day bean that you can, because you're going to get the best yield off it, right? You know, there's some guys down there that swear by that. Whether they frost out, they're still going to get a better yield than growing something with a lower maturity. But anyway, so this is Mammoth. You can see it's pretty tall. It gets very aggressive. But there's a lot of beans on there if we could take that to yield. So nutrient value to forage soybeans over anything else, I can't answer that question yet. The jury's still out. We're doing a bunch of work on it this year. Lee has got a bunch of sites where they planted early, and in fact, they're going to start harvesting next week on them. And then she's got some that they planted after first cut of hay, to see if you know, if there's any real difference on the tonnage that they're going to get. The other thing we're playing with is you'll notice inside the 4577 we've got Mammoth growing in between the rows, right? So those soybeans. So the thought is that if we can get some forage soybeans within our silage corn, and we get a good growth on it, then we're going to gain some tonnage just by having that, being able to cut that. So when you cut silage, you'll be able to cut those beans through. Big question is how you're going to plant it, right? Because if you plant it at the same time as corn, then you're creating competition and the beans will not grow, right? So when Greg planted this, we had the summer intern come in here and with a push planter, a hand planter, planted it when corn was at V2, like at 2 to 3 leaf stage. You don't want to go any longer than that, because then again you're going to get no growth in soybeans. But it's going to be interesting. She's got a couple of sites up there where some farmers have finagled their planter a little bit and planted some soybeans within a row, and they're going to harvest it and see if it adds any real tonnage to their silage, right? So it's something new that's happening, and it's new to us, but they're playing with this kind of stuff in the States. So we'll see if we can make it work here. But yeah, so that's forage soybeans. I don't know a lot about it. I'm from Chatham, Kent. There's not too much livestock down in Chatham, Kent, right, anymore. So, but it's quite interesting to see, especially when you look at how massive these plants can get to be. You know, they're lodged now in there, but you know, they'll get to be almost shoulder high if they can stand. So, and everything, I should have told you, everything's planted at 140,000, or as close as we can to 140,000 in small plots. It's hard to get the planter perfectly set, especially with different seed sizing and everything. But that's what our target is, about 140,000, and everything's at 30 inch.
So maybe I missed it. What stage do you harvest?
At R4.
R4.
So you know, like probably next week would be like just when they start to go a little bit of a tinge of a yellow.
Yep.
You want to get in there at that time, because you go in much later than that, you start getting leaves dropping and you're losing tonnage with the leaves dropping, right? You want a good, green, healthy plant.
It's pretty hard to get the timing with the beans and the corn for silage.
Well, you just
Yeah.
kind of hope you take what you get in that case, right? But if you're just going to do just straight silage, it's at our
I get it.
right? So, but silage has started already. I heard. Does anybody grow silage? I just heard this morning that they started cutting already. It's about a week and a half early. They figured. So, yeah. Okay, we'll move down our trial. So how many people use a foliar in their soybeans? Yeah. At what stage? Okay, with your fungicide? Okay, right. Anybody mix it with their glyphosate when they're going through their second pass of glyphosate? So I'll tell you a little story. So back when I was in the retail back in 1999, UAP had a product called Green with Envy. Anybody remember that one? It was Green with Envy. We sold it out of Dover, and we would sell a tote of it with a tote of glyphosate. And when they sprayed it. And it was true to its name, because as soon as you sprayed it, those beans turned as dark as green as possible. Now, did it convert to yield? 2, 3, 4 bushel, maybe 5 bushel. Made you feel good, right? Green with Envy, everything. You had the greenest field out there. And I think the first year we started to sell it, just a few guys did it. Then everybody was coming in saying, okay, I want to tote it out with my glyphosate, right? And foliar fertilizers aren't really expensive. It's about maybe $8 retail, roughly. So it's not even a bushel of beans. And the whole idea with putting a foliar on, especially at the R1 stage or the fungicide stage, is that we tend to abort soybeans at that stage, right? We get lots of flowers but no pods, or we abort some pods. So if we can give it a little boost, a little kick in the butt at that time, we're hoping that it holds on to more pods, right? With less. So what Greg has done here, we used a product called Alpine F18. It's got a blend of 846 with a micro package of boron, copper, manganese, and zinc. Okay, and what he did was, and I know I'm going to get yelled at this, but he did a control, one time through, a second pass, and then a third pass on the last one. So everything got one, and then this one got 2 passes, and that got third pass. The first pass was about June the 8th to the 12th, roughly in that area there. What's the problem with putting it on at that time? Okay,
Plants.
I was going to say the beans were planted on May the 12th, right? So there's not much growth there, right? But he just was playing, right? So we did that. This one here was done on June the 23rd, and that was on June the 30th, I believe. So 7 days is what he did between them. You look at them, you don't see much of a difference, right? And most of you will say the same thing. You look at your bean field, you don't see much of a difference using a foliar. It's what the combine shows you at the end, right? Is what you're going to end up seeing. Are you going to see 15 bushels, Pierre?
Never.
Never. What are you going to see?
On average, I don't like talking bushels. I talk percentage, anywhere from
Okay.
5 to 8%.
Okay, right on. Yep.
So
Yeah.
5% of 50 bushels, 2.5,
Yeah, exactly.
3 bushels.
Right, and it costs you $8,
Yep.
right? And beans are what right now? What's the market price for beans right now?
16 roughly.
What's that?
16.
16?
Yeah, you're looking half a bushel.
Exactly. That's what's costing you. And you're going through anyway, so why not add it, right? Now, we have replicated trials of this throughout the province, where we're gonna be able to take it to yield. This is gonna be hard to take it to yield here in these small plots. This is more just for demo. But and I'm sure Pierre's got plots all over the place as well, right? And it's not just like I'm plugging Alpine because they're a sponsor, and Pierre's a good guy. But there's all kinds of products out there to use, right? And they'll all give you some sort of a benefit, right? It just looks at the package that you're looking for. So I would never use a foliar in this case to replace a deficiency, right? Maybe a specific foliar for that specific deficiency, but a broad spectrum foliar like this, it's just more for kind of a little bit of a protection of the flowers and protection of the pods. Maybe build on here.
We call it a multivitamin.
Multivitamin, there you go. Exactly. Any questions, guys? I see people wandering, so I must be getting close to my end.
So
Greg actually beat me this time. I
you
usually
were
beat him.
talking about the dates that you did it.
Yep.
Can you tell us at what stage the plant was at that time?
I
More because when I sell it more at what I like to do it right at that flowering, right
Yep,
when it's starting
yep.
to flower.
Yep.
So that's
Yeah, and I think the middle one, like the second app, was right at that, right when flowers were starting, maybe a little
Pins,
pin
yeah.
beans starting,
Yeah.
and then the later one was just about 7 days later. He just wanted to give it a little boost and just see what he was.
And you see a different in pod count already?
No, I didn't do any pod counts in this one. It was hard enough doing pod counts over there. No, not yet, but we will. Like that will come out at the end. So. No questions? Well, thanks, guys. You know, isn't this nice to be able to just come out and do this kind of stuff without being cooped up and looking at a computer screen, especially on a beautiful day like today, right?